This crap needs to end. I don't understand. We have an entire population of people in America who are clapping, who are encouraging, and who think censorship by anybody, especially in government, or if you can say experts, is a good thing. I don't know who needs to hear this, but once you start censoring things, it never ends well. If you look at the history books, I know we're not allowed to talk about history books because don't compare this to the Nazis. Just don't do it. If it looks like it and it smells like it, it doesn't actually mean it's true. But let's listen to our favorite, Brian freaking Stelter, on his opinions of just the silliness of, and it's like, when are we going to grow up? You know, what do we need to do in order for people to feel like, you know what, I'm an adult. I can actually, make these decisions for myself. I don't need a sensory thing or a censor thing before I listen to something because I'm an adult and I can make the decision for myself. And so if you think that it's because people they're just not smart enough to deal with it, that's another thing. It's all about power and it's about controlling speech. To say otherwise, it's just not being intellectually honest. Let's be honest about that. If we could be honest about something and be honest about it, as I'm being honest, let's be honest. Let's listen to this clip. And this is the part of going live, people. This is the part of going live because you never know. Here we go.
The narrative is. I want to show all kinds of opinions.
Which sounds great, but not all opinions are created equal. You think about major newsrooms like CNN that have health departments and desks and operations that work hard on verifying information on COVID-19. And then you have talk show stars like Joe Rogan who just wing it, who make it up as they go along. And because figures like Rogan are trusted by people that don't trust real newsrooms, we have a problem that's much bigger than Spotify, much bigger than any single platform, Kate. But that's what is the heart of this right now.
Is there anything better than Brian Stelter saying he is a real newsroom? I want to hear this last part one more time. It just makes me giggle.
And then you have talk show stars like Joe Rogan who just wing it.
A talk show star. The thing I get more annoyed about Joe Rogan than anything in the whole world is people that comment on Joe Rogan's show like they actually listen to it. Because those of us, like myself, who actually listen to the show don't actually go around thinking Joe Rogan's an expert. He invites people on his show to have a conversation because that's how life used to be. We used to just talk to each other. And sometimes, every once in a while, we would say really crazy things. And sometimes those crazy things were actually completely spot on. But that's how life worked. And that's why people enjoy that podcast, because it feels real. It doesn't feel like anyone's reading from a script or feels like they're not allowed to say a curse word or a bad word, or they can just be themselves. And in fact, the best part of the show is that it's a couple hours long. And due to that, after the first 30 minutes, people start to shell off whatever insecurities they have, whatever person they think they are, or whatever message they wanted to have walking into the show, and they just become themselves. And you can feel it while you listen to it. And that's why people listen to podcasts. That's why I hope you listen to my podcast, because this is me. I'm not reading from a script. I don't have producers. It's me on my computer doing goofy things with the silly green screen in the background. There's nothing special about it. It's just you and me having a conversation. And I hope through listening to this conversation with myself, is that you don't feel as alone as you did a minute ago. You don't feel as alone as you did an hour ago. That I hope through my conversations, you get the essence that I am honest. I am truthful. I have integrity. I'm speaking from the heart and the mind. Like, I'm speaking from the hip and a lot of things, but like that I'm not just somebody that's looking for a job. I started doing this because I felt inclined to provide something different. There's so many podcasts out there that were like over the extreme and centered around outrage and just losing your minds and just saying outrageous things in order to gain attention and make people riled up. That's not me. And that's the same with Joe Rogan. His thing is not for outrage clips, but that's what people assume it is, because they've created this narrative in their head of what the podcast actually sounds like. But God, I would never listen to that white supremacist all the way through it, but I will definitely talk about it on my show with Brian Stelter. Misinformation. I want to keep listening to this one more time, this part.
Not COVID-19. And then you have talk show stars like Joe Rogan who just wing it, who make it up as
It's not a talk show.
they go along.
He's winging it because he's not the expert in the room. He is somebody who likes to ask questions. I remember a time when the people that asked questions rather than had all the right answers were some of the smartest people in the room.
And because figures like Rogan are trusted by people that don't trust real newsrooms.
This comment right here. This comment that Brian Stelter just said right here.
Don't trust real newsrooms. Rogan are trusted by people that don't trust real newsrooms.
People are trusting Joe Rogan that don't trust real newsrooms. Nobody goes to Joe Rogan for their news. But sometimes it happens through actual conversation. And sometimes when he invites people that are actual experts rather than these two people, it's fun to listen. And the more people that would just come on this podcast, the better it would be. But as always, there are obligations. There are people that feel like, I'm not going to go on that white supremacist podcast and not have that conversation. But who has encouraged people not going to a podcast, people not having a voice, people getting shadow banned and censored on social media? I can't think of, maybe you guys. But I digress. That's just...
We have a problem that's much bigger than Spotify, much bigger than any single platform, Kate.
Yeah, so big, such a huge problem. I'm going to be completely outraged about it because I strive on outrage.
But that's what is the heart of this right now.
Just so silly. But let's continue down the rope, because here's another clip that really grinds my gears. Because, Brian Stelter isn't saying enough when he says
that don't trust real newsrooms.
Don't trust real newsrooms. I feel like I could put that clip in my brain.
Rogan are trusted by people that don't trust real newsrooms.
Don't trust
real newsrooms.
that has to be a clip, because that's just so silly. But anyways, let's keep going down the pipe right here. Okay, Jen Psaki today is asked about Spotify, per usual. And here's Jen's comment about it.
Last week, the Surgeon General also was asked on MSNBC about Joe Rogan's vaccine comments on Spotify, and he said that tech companies have an important role to play in stopping misinformation because they are the predominant places where misinformation spreads. Spotify is putting out advisory warnings on episodes that have to do with COVID-19. Does the White House and the administration think this is a satisfactory step, or do you think that companies like Spotify should go further than just putting a label on there to say, hey, go do your own, check this out. There's more research you can look at, scientific research regarding COVID.
Sure. Well,
first of all, such a silly question. As always, the whole Joe Rogan thing about handling misinformation. Their mission until they're done is to get rid of all podcasts, like myself, all podcasts that have a voice, that feel like they have a voice in the fight, that feel like they can provide other information that the news agencies can't do anymore because they're so confined by their narrative and so confined by what they're allowed to say because they have writers. They're not just like you and me where we listen to something and we can react to something. We can talk to somebody. I didn't pre-write this part of the show at all. So this is me being completely honest, and they hate that. They don't like that because people are more interested in these kind of podcasts because they're getting to meet somebody who's real. They're feeling like this information they're hearing is real. And so when they make a connection, it feels more real than some fake person who has this a minute and a half conversation with somebody and then immediately cuts them off because I got to go to a commercial break. No one wants to listen to information like that anymore. Nobody wants to have the commercial break experience. Nobody wants to have the conversation cut off because it doesn't feel real. People don't want short clips anymore. for information. They want long form podcasts of information they're very serious about learning. And I think this whole Joe Rogan, Spotify thing is not going to end until they feel like they can get rid of podcasts as a whole. I just don't see it ending well, because once you open up the Pandora's box of censorship, it doesn't end. It just doesn't. And they're going to continue talking about this. You thought Joe Rogan coming out and having his say or whatever was going to change everything. It's not. It's going to make it worse. In fact, him just saying that there's things that he could do better, he's making it worse. And I think you'll find that out. I think people were all excited about this video and saying like, I'm just so glad. He seems very logical and all this stuff. And I listened to the video and I loved it too, because it was very logical. Any reasonable thinking person would see that and be like, yeah, duh, this is the same Joe Rogan that everyone knows. But people that don't listen and have this idea of who his podcast and what his podcast is about, like Sanjay Gupta, I saw him. He was like a big bear standing across from me, and that silly little news article he wrote. But, you know, let's keep listening. I'm curious what Jen Psaki's answer is.
Check this out. You know, there's more research you can look at, you know, scientific research regarding COVID.
Sure. Well, last July, you probably know, but the Surgeon General also took the unprecedented step to issue an advisory on the risk of misinformation in public health, which is a very significant step. And amid that, he talked about the role social media platforms have. So our hope is that all major tech platforms.
It's funny. It's like, why don't you just become more credible instead of like feeling like you need to censor other people? How about just make your message so fantastic that people can't help but notice and pay attention to what you have to say? But no, you, instead of having a conversation or just debunking any claim you hear, you got to censor it and shut down the speech, because, you know, that's what adults do, not children.
And all major news sources, for that matter, be responsible and be vigilant to ensure the American people have access to accurate information on something as significant as COVID-19. That certainly includes Spotify. So this disclaimer...
Did you say Spotify? Yo, get that Spotify. Freaking Spotify.
Come on, man.
Thank you, Joe. Let's keep listening.
It's a positive step, but we want every platform to continue doing more to call out mis and disinformation, while also uplifting accurate information. I mean, look at the facts, right? You are 16 times more likely to be hospitalized if you're...
Don't you love the minute she like goes into her little narrative rant? Just look at the facts. Hold on, let me get my pen and paper up right here. I'm just gonna read this information off to you because I got to stick to whatever I'm supposed to say.
Accurate information. I mean, look at the facts, right? You are 16 times more likely to be hospitalized if you're unvaccinated, and 68 times more likely to die than someone who is boosted if you're unvaccinated. That's pretty significant, and we think that is something that unquestionably should be the basis of how people are communicating about it. But ultimately, you know, our view is it's a good step, it's a positive step, but there's more that can be done.
Nobody would listen to Joe Rogan's podcast if it was all the same information. People listen to Joe Rogan's podcast because they feel like they're getting a different point of view or getting a different idea, and that's the whole point of conversation. That's the whole point of hosting some fringe scientists and stuff like that, or scientists that aren't as credible in the mainstream mainstream narrative mind. It's just, that's the whole point. That's why people like it. That's why people enjoy it, because they're like, I want to hear a different opinion or a different view. The idea that like there are scientific ideas out there, or especially with new studies, new things, that everyone is on the same consensus and everyone believes exactly the same thing, is just not a very honest viewpoint, and not a very like smart viewpoint. You want different opinions. You want to be challenged. You want, anytime you come up with a hypothesis in life, you want people to push your boundaries and for you to learn and grow and not just be stagnant. I mean, come on. We're adults, right? Okay. Let me know your thoughts on the whole censorship thing before we go on to the next news story. We're adults, right? We can just read something or look into something. Like no one thinks some of the crazy things that have been said to cure COVID are real. I mean, no one with a brain. I mean, people have passed me some things on social media accounts where I'm just like, okay, I don't know if that's gonna work, but okay. So And I'm an adult, so I can just like look up for myself, because if there is a cure for a certain illness or something that seems too good to be true, I will look up and find out. But I'm not going to be like, this is it, and if they say otherwise, it just means they're taking your information away from us or something. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that, because it's just so silly at this point that we even have to have this conversation about censorship, but I don't think it needs to be taken as something to be seen as silly. I think it should be taken very seriously, because it's the push from the state, Jen Psaki, and Joe Biden, and even Joe Biden said stuff about, censorship and misinformation and stuff like that. That push is really about stopping you and me from having a conversation or from information being passed, because you know what? The state, the government, the institution, the church, the Bible, the whatever, they want to keep it to themselves. They want to keep the truth to themselves, because you and I, little peons, just little people going about our lives, working 9-to-5 jobs, or maybe you're working the late shift. I don't know. Maybe you're an all-nighter. Who knows? You're not allowed to engage in the dialogue because you're not an expert. You haven't been trained by me. You haven't been trained by the experts. Let me know your thoughts.